That's pretty good. You want to know what I say to that?
You know what I have to say to that? Welcome to InterPartyConflict, the podcast where we answer your questions so you can have the best tabletop gaming experience possible. My name is Gabe.
And I'm Jeff.
We're going to answer your questions, but first, Jeff, what are you drinking?
I am drinking, this is Founder's Dirty Bastard. It is a Scotch-style ale. It's one of my favorites.
Okay. Well, I am drinking a nice ice-cold glass of RC Cola.
Tasty.
It is my favorite. So for everybody out there, today's our 21st episode.
Woo!
So since our episodes are 21, however that makes sense, right?
It's the 21 in podcast years.
21 in podcast years, yeah. So we are each drinking the beverage of our choice today. So, yeah. Aside from that, Jeff, how are you doing?
Pretty good. Doing cool. All right.
Yeah, same here. Been, keeping busy, going to work.
Sure.
Like I said, I can't really think of much else to say.
Yeah, it's been a pretty normal week for us, I guess. So
yeah.
Nothing too crazy.
Yeah. So I guess, if nothing else, we can just go ahead and get into the episode. If anything else comes to me, I can bring it up later.
Sure.
All right. So, Jeff, there are a couple D20s in front of you. Before you pick them up, though, you are in a tavern.
Okay.
And you're chatting it up with all your adventuring buddies, and then this creepy old man walks in. He's walking with like a limp. He's got a hood over half of his face, and he smells of sulfur.
Ooh.
And he comes in and he sits down at your table and he interrupts your conversation. And he says, I have a map right here. And he sets it down on the table, and he says, this map will lead you to untold riches and also untold danger. And then you're like looking at all your buddies. What the heck is this? And then you look back and the guy's gone. But
where'd he go?
I don't know, but the map is still there.
Oh, I'm going to look at that map.
So you pick up the map. I want you to go ahead and make an intelligence check. But because all your buddies are helping you out, you get to roll with advantage.
Oh, yay.
Please tell me it's more than a 3.
With advantage, I got a 16.
All right, awesome. See, I even took out all of the dice that I'm pretty sure are the cursed dice.
The cursed dice.
But, all right, so 16. With a 16, you are able to discern that this is a map that leads directly to the dragon's hoard. All right, so the item that we have today was submitted by Nicholas P. via email. And this item, he didn't make this item himself. He made sure to point that out. This item is actually from a resource called the SCP Wiki. SCP stands for like Secure, Contain, Protect, or something containment protocol. Basically, it's this website. It's this kind of interesting website where it's a fan created, or it's like, it's a user submitted resource where there's all of these entries where people submit. Some of them are from popular culture. Some of them are just things people made up. But imagine if the government had some sort of a warehouse where they were storing all of these like supernatural things that are too dangerous to be out in the world.
So like imagine like the warehouse from the end of the Indiana Jones where they have the the Ark.
Or there's a TV show, Warehouse 13. I'm not sure if you ever saw that.
Sure, okay.
So the SCP Wiki is kind of like a big resource of things that people have submitted that would be in such a warehouse. So a lot of the like entries, they're written in such a format that sometimes there'll be stuff that's redacted so that you're not supposed to know like where it was found or what it's called or whatever. All of them are something that is supernatural in some way that is dangerous to the world around it. Like there might be like, oh, there's a person in a cell that anytime you look at them, you forget what they look like. Or like you forget that they're there or something. Kind of like something from Doctor Who, I think.
Yeah.
And, stuff like that. So it's, I don't know why I never thought of this, but this actually could be a really cool resource for custom Magic items.
Yeah,
I'll
for sure.
I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But
yeah, it could be fun, like finding ways to put the mechanics in the game too.
Yeah.
I like doing stuff like that, trying to balance it.
So the item that was submitted by Nicholas P. is called the Clockworks, or it is SCP-914.
Okay.
I won't read quite all of this because there's a lot of detail about like what size it is and what it looks like and so on. But basically, it is a very, very large clockwork machine. So like you put in a key, you turn it, and you put something into like this intake booth. There's an intake booth and an output booth. So you put something in the input booth, you set it to what setting you want it to be, you crank it, and then it comes out the output. Now, there are 5 settings for the Clockworks. When you put something in, depending on what setting you have it on, the Clockworks will refine the object. Refining it generally turns it from one thing into something else, takes about 30 seconds to a minute. So like I said, there's 5 settings. The first setting is rough. What that means, when you put an object into the Clockworks and set it to rough, what comes out in the output is it was at one point the original object, but it will be dismantled or destroyed. The way I like to think of it is that it is reduced to its base parts. So if you were to put in, like, I don't know, a computer, and then put it on rough and then turn the crank, what would come out would be a broken up bunch of like bits of silicon and metal scraps.
Sure.
Maybe even like some gold and silver in there from like the connections and everything. So like it breaks it down into all of its base components, and then that's what comes out. So it would utterly destroy it, basically. The next one is coarse. This still dismantles it, but to less of an extent. So instead of like breaking everything down to like its individual components, I would say you just put in a computer, out comes a broken, pieces of a computer.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of broken up computer parts.
Sure.
Next up is 1-to-1. You put in an object, you turn the crank, what comes out is another object of the same type as the object you put in, but slightly different. So it's like it's different, has a different appearance, but it would be the same value.
Right.
So in D&D terms, you could like put in a short sword, and then what would come out would be a mace, because they both do the same amount of damage.
Sure. Yeah. So like functionally, they're
Functionally, they're similar enough. So
Right.
you put in a weapon, you get out a weapon, they do the same amount of damage, and so on. Next up is fine. When you put something in on fine and you turn the crank, what comes out is a better version of the item you put in. So maybe you put in like a rusty short sword, what comes out is like a bright, shining new short sword. Maybe like, I don't know how powerful you'd want to make this, but maybe a +1 short sword or something. But then the very last one is very fine. When you put something in on very fine, you turn the crank, what comes out is similar to fine. You will get a better version of the item, but it has an anomalous property. So like you as the DM might decide, okay, you put in a short sword, what comes out is a short sword that can transform into a hammer or something like that. But sometimes it might backfire, making the object harmful. You might pull out a short sword that is made of a material that is poisonous to the touch or something. I don't know. Now, if you were to use this in a game like D&D, it's really up to the DM how exactly the object would come out when it comes out. What is interesting, though, is that you can, in theory, put organic matter into the object.
Sure.
You could put a human being into the Clockworks. If you did, let's say you put a human being in on rough. They are dead. They have to make a very, very difficult Constitution save or die.
Sure.
And if they die, they come out horribly mutilated. I'm picturing like a goo there's some blood here, there's some ground up flesh here, there's some
come out
teeth.
as a delicious paste.
Pretty much, yeah. And then maybe if you put them in on coarse, they have to make a slightly less difficult Constitution save or take a crap ton of damage. And then if they fail the damage, maybe like they come out, maybe they're still alive, but like they're all
roughed up.
They're all roughed up. Maybe an arm is attached to where a leg would be. Leg is where their head should be. I don't know. Something like that. 1-to-1 is where I think it gets interesting. Oh, and sorry, one more thing Nicholas P. put in here. If a creature survives either rough or coarse, they have to roll on the long-term madness table in the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide. Oh. So even if they survive physically, they are not going to be okay afterwards.
They still have changed in a way.
Yes.
Which, there's a long-term madness table.
Yes, there is. It's one of the cool things in the DMG. In the back of the 5th edition DMG, there is a lot of really useful resources for stuff like that. There are rules on like how to deal with a player that loses a limb.
Oh, sure.
They're optional rules, of course, but the fact that that's there, that's really cool. I don't think any other edition has had actual rules about that. It's always just been up to the DM.
Yeah, at the very least, not in the core books.
Yes.
Well,
sorry.
You're going to do that. I'm going to do this.
Okay. Good job.
I did it. I dropped it on the table.
So when it gets interesting is when you get to 1-to-1. If a person were to get inside the machine and then someone were to crank it on 1-to-1, that person would be dead. Like they would die. But a different person or creature would come out the other side.
This would be a nice way to like justify me when I like change character mid-campaign because I decided that I made the wrong choice.
Yes, it would. So a person gets in, they set it to 1-to-1, they turn the crank, out comes a different person. Same level, they might be a different class, it might be a different race, it might be random. If you put a monster in, it'll similarly, a different monster will come out, but maybe like around the same challenge level.
Sure.
That person, however, does not have memories and will very likely attack the party. So in keeping with a lot of the items that have been submitted for the Dragon's Horde, this could lead to the party getting attacked by an equally leveled person. Then when you bring up Fine, when you put a creature in on Fine, has the same effect as 1-to-1, but the creature or monster, the person or monster will be slightly stronger. Sure. So you might have a 5th level character comes out as like a 6th level character. Or maybe a juvenile dragon comes out as like a young adult dragon or something.
Sure. Or if you're like in like 3rd edition, you go in as like a human, you come out as like a Goliath, which is like a +1 level modifier or something
like that. Yeah. And then if the creature is put through on Very Fine, it'll have the same effects as 1-to-1, except the replacement creature will be something extremely powerful. So you might put in a goblin and out comes a beholder.
Oh.
Or something like that.
Oh boy.
Or a person will become an extremely powerful character.
Sure.
So you put in a wizard, out comes an archmage.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting ways. I don't think I would ever use this in a game personally. I think there's just it would require players to, if a player wanted to use it, they would basically just be remaking a character. I think there could be some use for it.
Right.
But it's creepy. This is a creepy item.
Yeah, it's definitely like it's more of a plot item than anything else. Like it could be something that the characters come across. They can use it once and once only, and they might not know exactly what it does.
Yeah, I did mention it, but Nicholas P. did put in a caveat here to keep players from just using it on Very Fine over and over and over again. Sure. And it's that whenever a person goes in, they lose 1 from their maximum hit points. I personally think that's not quite. I would still use it if that was me. Yeah. But
I don't know about that. I don't know. I think there's a better way to
just say like there's just a limit of once per person. I think would probably be a safe way to
or once per mode. Like the machine you can only use each
setting.
Each setting you can only use it once.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, that might be the best way to do it.
Yeah, just so you can that way they have a way to test it.
And then if they're willing to chance making a very, very difficult save or die.
Right.
Heck, yeah, if they can try to do it again if they, if they want to take that chance.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, for the most part, I feel like this is more like a plot device, but it's a nice, creative, really cool plot device that can come up with some pretty cool things.
Yeah. It reminds me of back in early 3rd edition, there was a published adventure. It was The Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil.
Okay.
Which, there's been lots of other versions of it since, like, I think the Temple of Elemental Evil was a 1st or 2nd edition adventure, and then they made the 3rd edition version, which expanded on it quite a bit. There's been at least one computer game of it. I want to even say I think there's a 5th edition adventure of it.
I would imagine so. It's a classic.
Yeah, but there was a part in the 3rd edition adventure where the players encounter this like giant infernal machine, where similarly you can put a creature in, and then what happens is that creature takes a ton of damage. Then they are healed a bunch of damage if they aren't killed. So like if they take, I don't know, it's like 10d6 damage. If they survive that, they are then healed for 10d6 damage. When they come out the other end, they have an additional limb, which is rolled at random.
Yeah.
So you might end up with another arm.
Sure.
Like it might be a right arm, in which case like your right arm is like a demonic arm that has a claw attack.
Oh, God.
You might have a left arm that like gives you reach with one of your weapons or something.
All right.
You might have a demonic right leg that gives you like a +5 to your movement speed or something. Or like a left leg that like, I don't know, increases your jump check or something.
Like
and then
win at 3-legged races all the time.
Right. And then there was another one where you might end up with like a conjoined twin attached to your back.
Okay.
In which case it like can talk and like cast a spell per day or something weird like that.
Oh gosh, that reminds me of what's the book of the opposite of the Book of Exalted Deeds? What is it?
Book of Vile Darkness.
Book of Vile Darkness. In the Book of Vile Darkness, there's a prestige class that's like I don't know. I can't remember exactly what it is, but you have like a tumor or something. It's such like that book is just ridiculous. But
it really is.
That's that, and the Book of Exalted Deeds are both have like a mature content warning on them.
Yeah.
Which I thought is which when I was younger, I'm like, oh, that's so cool, But yeah, there's like some sort of like, I want to call it a cancer-mancer. That's not what it is.
It should be called that. Let's just put that right out there.
But no, you have this tumor or something that eventually becomes intelligent and can cast spells.
Oh my goodness.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
But that's what that reminds me of.
I remember in the Book of Vile Darkness, there were 2 pictures that just were so awesome. Number one was it was just a picture of what looked like a dwarven pirate stabbing an angel.
Okay.
Which was pretty cool because angel's blood was an artifact in there.
Huh.
And I think that was the page it was on.
Like the blood of angels.
The blood of an angel, yeah. It becomes like if a drop of an angel's blood like touches the ground, it becomes solid and becomes like a super powerful shuriken or something. You like throw it and kill things with it.
Sweet.
But and then the other picture that I really liked was for a spell. The spell was titled Crushing Fist of Spite.
Oh yeah.
And the picture was a giant fist made out of came out of the clouds and had like crushed someone to a bloody pulp.
Yeah.
And you're seeing like on the end of their fist is like a bloody skeleton.
Right, yeah.
And people like fleeing from it.
Right, yeah. There's just a big like fist-shaped crater in the ground with like a little splatter of blood, and then there's just like the skeleton of a man on the fist.
Yeah, that was such a cool picture.
Like, I mean, that definitely gets the idea across. It's
yeah. Like,
that's
Yeah. So yeah, this item, the Clockworks, I think it's a neat item, and there's a lot to it, of course, and it would be more of a plot device than necessarily an item, but something out there. And I'll definitely be looking at the SCP wiki for if we ever don't have any submissions in the future, maybe check out that.
You know what would be a good place for this?
What's that?
Jadaroon. It's the first adventure.
Yeah.
And this could be a way for people to basically re-roll their characters. So
yeah.
So you know how like in have you played Fallout 3?
I played Fallout 3 in New Vegas.
So like after you've basically gone through like the tutorial.
Yeah.
Like once you've done like the first little bit of like combat and stuff like that, there'll usually be a point like when you leave the vault or when you leave the first town, it'll be like, hey, do you want to re-roll your character?
Sure.
Be something like that. It's like, do you want to change your appearance? Do you want to change your name? Do you want to change your stats? That's usually like a little thing will pop up, and I think it auto saves there, so you can always go right back to it.
Okay.
And I think that it does the same in Skyrim as well. All those Bethesda games.
Yeah.
And I'm sure plenty of other games do as well. And I also bring this up because I played Fallout 4 last night for the first time in a while. But anyway, but yeah, that'd be like a cool little thing. Like, hey, if you really wanted to, if you felt like through this first adventure, you weren't super happy with the character you made, this might be a neat way to go about changing it. I don't know, just like as an option. Sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea.
And the clockwork works with Jadaroon. Like you go through Jadaroon and you find this this device at the end of it, and you're like, what the heck is this? And and you can just say to your players like, hey, look, if you guys aren't happy with this, we can definitely fit it into the story in a way that you come out a different person, which is just cool by itself. That's a crazy thing to have happened. So it might just make it neat. So it for someone like me who, is not always satisfied with their character halfway through the first couple adventures. I've definitely changed my character in the middle of an adventure before.
Yeah. With the DM's permission, let's make that clear.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you don't always want to do that with the DM's permission, but I mean, and DMs, if your players are having issues with their character, it should, you should definitely try to find a way to help them out.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people ask about one of the players in my group, this new book comes out and he wants to remake his character. Should I let him? Now, of course, there's potential for it to get out of hand, but I would say wait until it gets out of hand before you tell a player no. Because if a player wants to remake their character, whether it's because of a new book or not, if a player wants to remake their character, it's because they're not having fun, or they're not having as much fun as they think they could be. If a player isn't having fun, don't penalize them by saying, no, you have to stick with that character.
Right, yeah.
Of course there's the issue of would the story be internally consistent if a different character is going along with the party? There's ways to get around that. If it's just a matter of them wanting to change their class, that's not an issue at all, because class doesn't exist in universe. That is a game mechanic.
Right, yeah.
People in game are not going to say, "Oh, you're a fighter."
Yeah.
They might
call you a fighter.
Yes,
they might find
a fighter with a lowercase f.
Right, or they might just refer to you as the warrior or something like that.
Exactly. So that's not really an issue. If it's a matter of they want to just play a different character, there are ways to integrate the character in ways that would make sense. And I mean, it's going to take some time, and it's going to depend on exactly what situation you're in.
Yeah.
But I would advise against writing it off. You might maybe make sure that the character is sure that that's what they want to do.
Right.
So that they don't switch and then immediately want to switch back.
Sure.
But, if a player wants to change their characters because they aren't having fun, and there's no reason to stop them from having fun unless there's a really good reason, which I can't really think of many good reasons.
Yeah, I can't really think of anything.
Anyway. So that was all the Dragon's Hoard. So if anybody wanted to submit new items for the Dragon's Hoard, or if they want to submit questions, Jeff, how would they do so?
They could probably do that by sending us an email at InterPartyConflict@gmail.com.
All right. Let me just take another sip.
Oh, sure.
All right. You want to go ahead and get on to the first question?
Sure thing. All right, this first question comes from Zeus and his beard, and I want to take the second and say thanks to Zeus and his beard for all his questions.
Yes, he sent us a lot of questions. Yeah. Also, to Nicholas P. Nicholas P. has sent in most of our Dragon's Hoard items.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so, Nicholas P. All the regulars, we really appreciate all the contributions.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Zeus and his beard asks, and this is on Reddit. When you plan a session, what are the things that you always make sure to prepare? What are some things that you plan on improvising? So do we have a golden list of things that we always make sure to know before a session starts, or do you just kind of wing it?
Well, there are some things that I always try to have planned, and it's really going to depend on what it is you're running. It's going to matter whether you're running a pre-written adventure as opposed to an original adventure.
Right.
It's also going to depend on whether you plan for there to be combat encounters or non-combat encounters. If you're running a pre-written adventure, the simple answer is, well, really the simple answer for all of this is just like prepare however much you think you'll need.
Sure.
If you're running a pre-written adventure, just, make sure that you know the material really well. Make sure that whatever you think that you'll cover, well enough. You've read it over a couple times.
Yeah, and a well-made pre-made adventure will usually have some things to kind of have on hand, like in case this happens, sort of things.
Yeah. And I always like to assume that we'll get through more than we necessarily will. Everything always ends up taking longer than I expected, right. But I would rather be over-prepared than under-prepared.
Right.
If it's an original adventure, then, you just got to think of like, what do I want to happen during the session? Do I want them to fight this bad guy? Do I want them to encounter this NPC? So know those things. Whenever I start a session, let's say I'm running a session that's an original session, then I like to have an idea of at least one combat that is going to happen, just because, combat takes a long time. You are probably going to have at least one combat per session. So make sure that you at least have an idea of it. You don't have to know exactly what the characters are going to be fighting or what the stats are of those things. But like if I at least know, okay, this encounter might take place, and in that encounter, there's probably going to be an ogre and 3 goblins or something similar, or even just like a big tough guy and a bunch of smaller, weaker guys. Then I at least have an idea. If I have to take a couple minutes to flip through the monster manual, I can.
Sure.
But if possible, I would like to at least, I would like to be more prepared and know, like, okay, 1 ogre, which is on this page, and then 3 goblins, which are on this page.
Yeah.
I also want to know a few NPCs that might come into play. So if this is, something that if I've already established these NPCs, then just maybe write down which NPCs they are. If I have to, maybe some important notes about them, something that I want them to say to the players.
Right.
And then I like to have a vague list of events that might happen. So if they're in a dungeon, there's not really too many things that might happen. There might be, a random encounter with this thing happens or whatever. I guess it's not really random if I have it planned. But,
right. Like a cave-in in a corridor or something like that.
Just something so that I can look at it and know, okay, the players have done this and this. I still want them to do this and this. And with all of these, the more that you have planned, the better it will go. The more smoothly it will go. So every time that I have prepared less, there is a noticeable amount of speed bumps that we run into.
Sure.
The more I prepare every single time, the smoother it goes. One thing that I do want to talk about is last year there was a session I was running in our Shackled City. It was a 4th edition Shackled City campaign. There's an event close to the beginning of the campaign. It's a couple adventures in where there's this big festival. It's the flood season. And so every flood season, the town has this really, really big festival where everybody, there's like people selling stuff. All the restaurants do crazy stuff. All the churches do whatever. And so I knew that there weren't going to be very many encounters in this session, but I still wanted this session to be chock full of stuff. So I spent probably 10 hours over the course of the week while I was at work, just jotting down, okay, this might happen. Well, and then if that happens, maybe this other thing will happen. I came up with all sorts of stuff to happen, just events that the players can do. And it wasn't stuff that they had to do.
Right.
It was, you guys can do this, you can do this, and you can do that. I don't think the players did everything, but they could have.
Right. It was like this festival where there was a lot of different like competitions and things that we could go through, and like there was like a swimming one, there was a drinking competition or to some sort. But
some of those were in, because I was running, it was a pre-written adventure. I had the hardcover. Some of them were in the hardcover, but only a few things. There was a swimming competition thing at the beginning. That was in the adventure. I don't think they gave really details about the drinking competition. It was just something they mentioned there might be.
Sure.
Or did they? Maybe they did.
I don't know. I mean,
they might have.
But there's taverns. It's probably a drinking competition.
I guess. But when I did run this drinking competition, I made up a bunch of NPCs for the players to compete against.
Yes.
And, small little thing here. All of the NPCs that I put in were references to other campaigns that I've run. So like somebody was competing against one of Jay's old characters. crap, who were the other characters? I don't remember who the other characters were, but I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a good time.
Yeah, so I made up, I could have just had, okay, roll a bunch of dice and then that'll be the drinking competition. But no, I wanted to make it really memorable. So I did plan out all these NPCs for the players to encounter. And then I figured because the festival was put on by the churches, I figured each church would have something special going on. So I came up with in addition to each church was going to be doing a sermon, and I came up with topics for each of the sermons. And then I decided that each church had some sort of a small magical boon that they would give you, or some sort of a slightly mechanical thing they could give you. If you went to the church of Harip, which was the church of the god of hand-to-hand combat, they could teach you to use a weapon. Huh. Or if you went to the church of Tara Gales, which was the church of the goddess of undeath, but also vanity. So they would put a small magical enchantment on you to make you look better for a short period of time. Stuff like that. So they would you could go to each of the churches and they would give you some sort of a small, mostly role playing, but some sort of mechanical benefit as well.
Yeah, and I know a lot of them were useful in some of the other competitions and things.
Yeah. And so
relevant of what was going on.
Right. So I put a lot of work into coming up with NPCs the characters could encounter, events for them to take part in, and even within the events, just small little details that would make it more than just me reading from a box within the book.
Right.
So yeah, anything that you can do to get the players more engaged in what's happening, any kind of detail you feel like putting in can be additive.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I also did was I recorded a stand-up comedian because there was going to be a part of this festival where the people can perform. And so I decided that I wanted there to be a stand-up comedian the players could listen to. So,
oh yeah, that was
so I
was too good.
Yeah, so I recorded myself doing a little short stand-up routine, and I referenced events that I planned on the players doing.
Right.
So then if the players did a certain thing, then they would be listening to the stand-up comedian, and then the comedian would mention what one of the players had did.
Sure.
But I made sure to put in enough of them that if the players didn't take part in something, it wouldn't seem like he was only talking about them. He was talking about just other stuff.
Sure.
So because at one point there was a game where you throw a ball and you hit a target and a guy gets dunked in water. I had done that, and I had the comedian mention he saw somebody do that, and then I had one of the players do exactly that so that it seemed like he was referring to what the player had done. So anyway, So I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here, but really, like I said, I want to have at least one combat idea as in-depth as I want to prepare as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few NPCs that might come into play, even just a list of names.
Yeah. I mean, I can talk about the amount of time it takes me to come up with a name for my character.
Yes.
So having a list on hand of names for NPCs and stuff like that is a really good idea, because you never know when one of your players wants to ask somebody for information or go into a tavern you weren't expecting them to go into.
Yeah.
And you need to at least throw out a name, because hey, what's your name? Georgina?
My name is NPC.
NPC. Sorry.
Yeah, so even just having a list of names so that when a player, because then if you have an NPC mention something to a player and then they're like, oh yeah, that's interesting, what's your name? And then you're like, his name is Bob. They're going to know that this is clearly not a very important NPC.
Bob, but spelled with a PH.
I once met a guy whose name was Bob spelled with a GH.
Stop it.
His name was Boughb.
Okay.
That was his name.
All right, I guess I could see that.
But so if they ask the NPC's name and then you clearly do not have a name prepared, mm-hmm. they're going to think, whether they are true or not, they're going to think, okay, this is not a very important NPC. This is just somebody they made up.
Yeah.
But if instead they say, oh, what's your name? And then you look at your notes and you're like, oh, this name is Bob. then they'll think, oh, okay, this is somebody that he had planned. This is not just something he made up off the top of his head. Maybe this is an important NPC.
Mm-hmm. And I like that because it's not just like, oh, this is obviously somebody we need to talk to, and like he might be a quest giver or something like that. Like the player starts making up ideas in their head about who this is.
Yeah.
And this could be some nobody NPC that you just threw a name, but you had the name ahead of time. But they might start thinking of that NPC as more important than they actually are, and like actually start incorporating that NPC into the game more, which makes the world more real to that player.
Yeah.
It makes the game that much more enjoyable.
I mentioned a while ago during the Age of Worms thing, there's a point where Steve's character, Steve was like, he was just gathering information in the town, and I was reading rumors from the adventure, and I was just talking as if it was an NPC giving this information to the player, as opposed to it just being information the character has picked up. And Steve was interacting with this character enough that I eventually kind of decided to make them all be from the same character. So the same NPC is giving him all of this information. And then that led me to think, well, who is this guy? And then that led to me eventually turning it into one of the many forms of Ichi. So that like it turned out to be Ichi, hanging out in this town, which I then had like a little Easter egg for later on. So
should we do a ding for Ichi now?
Well,
or is it more like a boing?
I really wanted. So last episode, we had so many times where we mentioned Eberron. I wanted to find if there was a such thing as a steampunk ding. I was going to put that into the episode, but I couldn't find a suitable sound effect. So I didn't.
Something to that effect.
Because I don't really mention Ichi that much.
No, yeah, no.
No. Yeah. But anyway, so me having a player take enough of an interest in a specific NPC that I didn't plan on them being important led to that NPC becoming more important. Similarly, when I was running Shackle City, first adventure of the Shackle City, there was a time in the beginning of the first adventure, the players they're kind of on like a little mystery. A bunch of kids have been kidnapped and they're going around trying to find out who's been kidnapping them. At one point, they decide to go and check out the locksmith. And I guess the way that I don't know if it was how smoothly I had come up with the locksmith's like name and everything, but like the way that I presented it to the players, Steve assumed that this was just a guy that I had made up. So when the encounter with the locksmith ended up having a lot more to it than just, a random just talking to a guy, that took him completely by surprise. So I think that's a way that can work in your favor as well. If all of your NPCs, whether they're ones you've made up or ones that are in the book, if you present all of them the same way, there may be times when a player writes off an NPC as just being a random person, and then they turn out to be really important, and then it takes the player by surprise.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a way to fight metagaming, which like people are going to metagame whether they intend to or not.
Right.
It's just going to happen. And like when you think about metagaming in like a video game way, it's usually impossible not to, because there'll be a character called Commoner and there'll be a character called like John Smith, and you're like, "Oh, obviously I have to talk to John Smith. He has an exclamation point above his head or something like that." So that's, so that's kind of sort of a thing is almost expected in any gaming, like even tabletop gaming, to where like, okay, this guy has, this elf character has 12 apostrophes in his name. He must be very important.
Yes.
That's a thing. That's a thing that we have, that the more apostrophes that a elf has in their name,
the more important they are.
Yeah, it's like a nobility thing.
Yes.
It's their stature.
This is something you just made me think of that kind of fits this. And this comes to, if you're going to have a part of your adventure that there's going to be like, I don't know how to explain this. So, okay, let's say the players are investigating like a disappearance of some professor, and they go into the professor's office. If the DM says, okay, you walk into the office, you see his desk, you see his chair behind his desk, he's got like all these bookcases, and then you notice there is a golden quill laying on his desk. Mm-hmm. What's the first thing that you're going to do?
Gonna check out that golden quill.
Exactly. And then, of course, the golden quill turns out to be, a magical key that opens up a hidden door or something. that's not the way that you want to present it. If you're not very prepared, that's probably how you're going to do it. You're probably going to be like, oh, crap, well, there's this quill. I should probably mention the quill because that's important to solving the thing.
Right.
If instead the players walk in and it's like, okay, you see his desk. On his desk, he's got a knocked over bottle of ink that's dried. Right next to it is a golden quill. It looks like he was using before he knocked over the ink. He's got a stack of books on his desk. Here's the name of a few of the books. On the bookcase, you see that like one of the bookcases is empty. Another one of the bookcases has been knocked over. The more detail you give them, the less any one particular piece of that is going to stand out.
Sure.
So although it may take them more time to solve the puzzle, they won't immediately be like, oh, that golden quill. There's got to be something up with that golden quill.
Yeah.
It's like if you watch an old cartoon and there's the one book on the bookshelf that is a different color than the rest of them. And,
right.
then, of course, one of the characters walks over and pulls that and the door opens.
Yep.
So similar to planning your session, you want to have like the little, if you can, you want to have the little micro encounters planned out as well, planned out to the level that you can give them to your players without one single part seeming conspicuous.
Yeah. Although I think you want to be careful with that because, like you said, it might take them a little longer to solve that. If that's the only solution, you might want to have it stick out a little bit. Otherwise, you could be there forever.
That's a good point.
But if it is just like one of those things where it's like if they happen to find that, they find like the secret entrance to the dungeon that like is like a shortcut.
Yeah.
Or something, or it leads to like an extra treasure room or something like that. So it's like more of a secret area bonus sort of situation.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Like you'll throw it out there, but it's not as in the forefront as everything else. Like,
you just remind me of something that is pertinent to this question. I am terrible at making dungeons.
Okay.
When I first started DMing, every dungeon that I made was essentially a straight line. It might be a straight line, like it might be like in like an S shape or something.
Sure.
But there were no deviations.
Yeah.
So if you're planning on running a dungeon, I recommend finding, like if you have to make the dungeon yourself, find another dungeon somebody else has made. You can go to Google and you can type in, dungeon map or something. And you can find so many maps of dungeons.
There's like made. Dungeon generators too.
Exactly.
That'll have plenty of little options you can click that make sure there's secret areas and things like that.
Yeah. Cause like if it was up to me, if I had to come up with a dungeon on the spot, it's going to be like, okay, there's a straight line. Maybe there's like, you come to a fork with two possible things. One of them is a dead end.
Sure.
So, I mean, I've gotten better about it over the years, but making dungeons is definitely one of my weaker points. So if you're going to be running a dungeon, you want to have a map of it. Whether you're going to like give the map to your players or even if you're not going to draw it out, just knowing in your head what the dungeon looks like, having a thing that you can refer to is going to be very, very helpful. We kind of talked about it with like mazes, communicating to the players where they are and everything. Like that's really, really hard if there isn't a physical map.
Yeah.
So if you're not trying to confuse the players, then just have a physical map somewhere.
Right.
Anyway, I think that'll do it for this one. Like I said, just make sure you have an idea of the encounters you're going to do, some NPCs, and then a vague list of events.
Yeah. Just have just a handful of things, even if they're not like super detailed out, just something that you can at least build off of in the moment.
Yeah. And seriously, the more prepared you are, the more smoothly it's going to go. Even if the players deviate from your plan immediately, at least you still have a possible encounter. You still have a list of NPC names.
Yeah, yeah. Those are things that you can use in most situations.
Right.
Okay. Our next question comes from Ralil. This is from N-World, and the question is, how do you make a dynamic combat encounter?
Now, this is another one where the answer really comes to preparation, but the question really, or the thing you really need to know is the definition of dynamic. Dynamic really just means changeable.
Sure.
So if you go into an encounter, if you set up an encounter, and then after you set it up, you look at the encounter and you say, what things about this encounter could change during the encounter? That right there is going to help you make a dynamic encounter. So let's say you have an encounter with an ogre and 3 goblins. and you're in, let's say you're in a dungeon. Number one, you could make it so that after a few rounds, more goblins show up.
Sure.
That could be something that would make it more dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to make it so that after a couple rounds, maybe one of the goblins runs away.
Sure.
Maybe that makes that part of the encounter easier. Maybe it makes a later encounter harder because now the later encounter knows that there's people coming.
Right. Yeah.
You could also make it so that part of the terrain can change.
Mm-hmm.
You might say that there's a bunch of tables in this room that can be knocked over for cover. Or maybe there's a bookshelf that can be knocked over onto somebody. Or maybe there's a big door that the enemies can break the door open, and then either number one, have a place to run to, or number two, there's a monster behind it that's going to come into the encounter as well.
Sure.
So just look at what things can be changed that can make the encounter more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So go crazy with the environments. Make it so a wall can be broken down so that there's someone, they can get away, or they can use part of that wall for cover.
Right.
They can break the wall, pick up part of the wall and throw it at you. A chandelier that they can swing on as part of their attack, or maybe part of the environment that they can use as a weapon. There's lots of stuff like that. You can make it so there's a trap in the room that keeps resetting.
Right. Yeah, things like traps, and there are plenty of creatures that even in their stat block have things that change throughout the battle.
Yeah.
One thing comes to mind is the 4th edition mechanic, Bloodied.
Yes.
So I think that's when you're below half hit points.
Yeah.
When you're below half hit points, you become bloodied, and a lot of, players as well, some of the class skills that they get, but monsters will have something that once they're bloodied, they might have a different attack that they can use, some ability that they couldn't use otherwise, or they might take less damage or deal more damage, things like that.
In the Dark Souls board game, when you fight a boss, they have a set number of attacks that they do. So you have a little deck, because it's all card based. There's a deck of attacks, and when you start the encounter, you randomly draw out some of those cards. So some of the moves they will have, some of the moves they won't. They do those same moves in the same order every time. So every round, they'll do this attack, and then they'll do this attack, and then this attack. But once you get them down to half health, you add in a bunch of extra cards, and then you shuffle them all up so that when they get to half health, they not only have more attacks, but their attacks are not going to be in the same order.
Right.
So you won't be able to plan for them as well. That could be translated into D&D similarly.
Sure.
Like you were saying, when a monster gets too bloodied, gets to half health, something about their behavior changes. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I think 4th edition did really well, is the bloodied mechanic.
Yeah.
When a monster gets to half health, something about them changes. Maybe they get an extra attack. Maybe like with dragons, I think when you get a dragon to half health, their breath weapon immediately recharges and they immediately use it, even though it's not their turn.
Sure.
So,
Thanks.
Yeah. So that's something that's really cool. You could even make it, going to another Dark Souls example, one of the most iconic fights in Dark Souls was the fight with Ornstein and Smo. Ornstein and Smo were these two bosses. They were these two guys in armor that you fight in at the same time. And when you first start the fight, you're fighting two of them. But once you have killed one of them, whoever is left gets all his health back, and he gets a huge buff gives him some of the abilities of the one that you killed. Mm-hmm. So if you kill Ornstein first, Ornstein has lightning attacks. Smo gains lightning attacks. Or if you kill Smo first, Smo is very large. Ornstein gets really large.
Huh.
So, and then also, just another thing with dynamic encounters, in that fight, and as well as lots of fights in Dark Souls, bosses can destroy parts of the environment.
Sure.
So like in the Ornstein and Smo fight, they might destroy pillars that you're using for cover. I guess technically in that fight, you can still use them for cover after they're destroyed. But just think of something in the encounter that could be changed, even if it's just a cinematic change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing that I want to mention in the Adventure Zone, I've mentioned them lots of times. Almost all of the big boss fights in the Adventure Zone podcast are so dynamic, which is really, really cool. In the first story arc, I think they were fighting a bad guy, and there was a big door that something was behind. And then they had to I think they either had to beat the bad guy before the door opened, or maybe they opened the door and let out what was behind so that it killed the bad guy. I can't really remember. But then there was another encounter where the players were on a vehicle, I don't know, Mad Max style. They were on this race through the desert. And then they were on one vehicle. Another vehicle would ride up next to them. They would jump across to the other vehicle, beat those bad guys, and then jump back to their own vehicle. Mm-hmm. And so every few rounds, another vehicle would show up, and they would have to deal with that one a different way than they dealt with the previous ones. Mm-hmm. And so that was a very, very dynamic encounter. So just use that as an example of, ways that you might not have thought of to introduce a level of changeability.
Sure.
So yeah, really just look at your encounter and say to yourself, what about this encounter could change? And would that make it more interesting? I would say most of the time the answer is going to be yes.
Yeah. I mean, changes, unless you're just throwing more and more and more and more enemies.
That's true, yeah.
That could get tedious and deadly for the players.
Right.
But, little things that can change with the creatures that they're fighting, little things that can change with the players themselves. You might have a player come down with a condition or something like that.
Or something happens and a player gets a huge boost to one of their abilities.
Sure, yeah. Little environmental effects, to look at the setting that you're in, look at not just the room that they're in, but maybe even the region. There might be some big global event going on.
Yeah.
Tons of things that you can do. But yeah, little things that you can change, try to have at least one little thing happening in every encounter that you come with. It'll make things a little bit more interesting.
Yeah. Anything that can keep the fight from just being, okay, I roll to attack, I do 6 damage. He rolls to hit me, he does 12 damage. Anything that can keep it from being like that is going to be better for your campaign. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just think about what stuff can change, and that's going to make it more dynamic.
I'm thinking of in Shackled City, there's a point in the first adventure where there's an elevator or some sort of there's some sort of elevator that you end up fighting on, and at a point in the encounter, Gabe had one of the enemies pull the lever to have the elevator start going down, which in the mind of a player is okay, this is probably bad because there's probably more bad guys down there that we don't want to deal with.
Yeah.
And so that the immediate goal is to stop the elevator somehow, is to get to that lever before it gets to, before the elevator starts going.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that's the actual encounter didn't change because you're still in the same small area. You're still fighting the same enemies, mm-hmm. but the goal changed.
Yeah.
Because that goal was, instead of just killing the bad guys, to stop the elevator.
Yeah. And I think in that specific situation, I think Steven's character wasn't on the elevator at the time.
That's a good point. He was in the doorway leading out of the elevator.
Yeah, so it was very important to the party to get that, to stop that elevator, so that we wouldn't be one person down and in an unknown area.
That was an interesting encounter because it was really difficult.
Yeah.
Because the enemies had such high AC.
Yeah, and they had it's it was the 4th edition Hobgoblin, I think.
Yeah.
And when they're adjacent to each other, their
AC bonus is even higher or something.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, so I felt kind of bad at the time because I felt like it did get to be a slog where it's okay, well, you rolled a hit, I guess you miss, so the battle's going to keep going. But at the same time, that meant that a lot of stuff did happen, mm-hmm. tactics-wise, similar to what you were saying.
Yeah.
Because if you had just killed them too quickly, then it wouldn't have had that, dynamic element.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's that might be a good way that if an encounter is going on too long, mm-hmm. you might have something like that happen, something change.
Yeah.
Even if it's in the favor of the players, as long as it's not too as long as it doesn't feel like you're throwing them too much of a bone, basically.
Yeah, I can understand.
It's not too much Deus Ex Machina.
Sure,
proper term to use.
I feel like I don't remember what, I think it was for one of the Paizo Adventure Paths somewhere. I remember reading something from somebody involved with either D&D or Pathfinder. One of the editors or whatever was talking about whenever you feel like there is a lull in a session, mm-hmm. have the enemies kick the door in. Possibly figuratively, but most of the time literally. If there's ever a time where the action is lagging, either it's in a combat or maybe just the players are trying to decide what to do next, to just break up the monotony, literally have the door get kicked in by an enemy and then go from there. If it's in combat, more enemies show up.
Sure.
And something different happens. If it's, like I said, the players are trying to decide where to go next, the enemies came to them. And then after you have the enemies kick the door in, you can decide exactly why they did that, what led to them doing that, and possibly the adventure is going to go in a different direction now. Because maybe the bad guys know where the players, their hideout is now.
Or maybe the bad guys that kicked in the door were the ones that they were going to have to fight anyway, and there's less encounters in the future.
Exactly.
I think in that situation, that's a good idea, because a lot of times players are having a hard time figuring out what they want to do because they have all these cool abilities that they can use, but they're not going to because they want to save them just in case.
Yeah.
So if it feels like combat is dragging on because players are waiting for that just in case moment, make that moment happen.
Yeah.
So kick in those doors, have the boss just show up, and then like, okay, now they have the right excuse to use their best abilities. And that kind of actually makes things quicker because like a lot of times those abilities are really good.
Yeah. And then I've even got to wonder, like, let's say we were going through an adventure and halfway through things were lagging. So, suddenly we fought the last boss right now. That'd be really cool because clearly we weren't super excited about having to get to the final boss. So not having the encounters between now and the final boss wouldn't always be a bad thing.
Sure.
Like, yeah, we'll get less experience or something, but like having encounters just for the sake of having encounters isn't necessarily a good thing.
Right. Yeah. Like, because you want to have enough to where the players can like level up in time for the next adventure or something like that. But you can always find other ways to give your players experience. Yeah. But like if it does feel like things are lagging on, or like you don't want to rush it too much to where like if you're really just trying to get the adventure over with, I don't think you want to rush into it. Yeah. Too much. But yeah, I think if the players are having a hard time like getting through the dungeon, or they're just taking a long time, and it's like it's an encounter after an encounter after encounter, and they haven't found like the right key or something. Sure. Yeah, that's a thing that could happen in Jadaroon. There are so many doors and so many keys, and some keys that are behind the doors that are for that the key is for. Like there's no way to get to it except for some hidden passage. One of the keys in that book, because like I said, it's this big hardcover. And one of the keys is not in that section of the is not in that section of the hardcover. You can read through the entire adventure 100 times and not find that key. Isn't it like it's in the description? It is in one of the NPC's stat blocks, which is at the very end of the book. So you not only have to look at the enemies at the end of the book, and then look through the stat block to know, oh, this guy has the key. Right. Anyway. Yeah. So just to make a dynamic encounter, you just look at it and say, what could I change mid-battle? And would that make it more interesting? Sure. It's something that's easy to do and hard to do. It's like, yes, it's easy as just changing something. Yeah. But, what to change is the hard part, and whether or not that's going to make it, like whether or not that's just going to make it too crazy or silly. Yeah. All right. This next question is from Ambiguous Ditto. This is on Reddit. How should I speed up the pace of play? For that matter, should I even try to speed it up? Would that have any negative impact of the players in the campaign? I don't really think it would often have a negative impact to speed up the game. I mean, most of the time that's people's main complaint, is that the game takes too long. And the majority of the slowdown is going to come in combat. So if you can speed up combat, which we've talked a little bit, like in our first couple episodes we talked about. I want to say in our first episode, we definitely touched on it. Probably, yeah. Some of the ways you can speed up play in combat, and like our previous two questions, this really comes down to preparation. Like the biggest thing is how prepared you are. That's how prepared you and the players are. Mm-hmm. That's going to determine how quickly the game goes. Yeah. So in combat, if you're a player, knowing what options your character has, knowing what spells you have and what those spells do. That is a huge, huge, huge reason that games take forever sometimes, is because
Number one, players don't know their spells very well, so they can't pick one. And then when they do pick one, they have to like constantly be looking up the rules.
Sure.
So anything that you can do to prepare for that, if that's just reading over your spells, if that's writing out your spells onto like flashcards so that you can have them right in front of you and you don't have to flip through the book, knowing what your bonuses are, knowing what you add to what, knowing which die to roll, all of those things are going to speed up the game.
I think this is one of the reasons why we've talked about this. We've had a question on this before. Session 0.
Yes.
This is why that's important. Because that's the time where people can prepare. That's the time people can get familiar with their characters. Yeah, you're going to level up and gain more spells eventually, and you'll have to learn those as you go. But having time at the beginning of the campaign to get to know your character, and for the DM to get to know his players' characters and the NPCs that he's going to be working with.
Yeah.
Like having that extra time to get to know everything is really going to help speed things up in the long run.
Right.
Something that you had us do the last time we played, this was the 4th edition.
Yeah, it was the Shackled City.
Yeah. Something you had us do is like you had a list of questions that you wanted us to answer in like basically questions about our characters. I can't really remember any of them off the top of my head, but I want to say like, things like what is their job? Like what, things like that. Like
how long has your character been an adventurer?
Sure.
Stuff like that. Where does your character live?
Right. Yeah. Like where do they live? How long are they from the area that the campaign is set in? How long have they been there?
Yeah. Do they have any family?
Sure. Little things like that. So that's all that's all stuff that can be used by the DM. Obviously, because let's say that's information that they can build the story off of.
Sure.
But that's also something that the player can be using to know what their character is going to do. So when a character comes across a tough decision, they don't have to sit there and think about what would my character do. They can just look back to that list of questions that the DM had asked at the beginning and compare it to that and say like, okay, the DM, maybe one of the questions you could ask is you can give them like a certain situation. Like if you had a choice to save this or that, if you had a choice to save a child or a doctor or something like that.
Sure.
Like which would your character, pick? And like, yeah, that's a tough question, but it's like if your character would save the child, then like coming across a hard decision later in the campaign, that might be something that you can like, grab onto and say like, okay, this makes this decision a little bit easier. Like, yes, he would save the innocent. Before he would save somebody who was a little bit older or something.
And that doesn't ever mean that you're like, you have to do what you said in your thing. You can always change the way that your character can always evolve the more that you get more comfortable with them and everything. But if you're ever in need of just, I don't know how my character would deal with this, knowing what you might have said at the beginning of the campaign, can give you a good idea of what to do now. So yeah, because it's not just in combat, it's also out of combat. Yeah. So just knowing what your character would do personality-wise, that's something that's going to take a little time to get used to, but
for sure.
But once, anything that you can do to prepare for possible things like that in the future will make the game go more smoothly. Also, just knowing the setting really well will impact how smoothly you're able to interact with NPCs.
Yeah.
So if you know that, let's say that the people in this area are really judgmental against outsiders or something, then that might give you an instant idea of how to interact with NPCs if you're the outsider.
Yeah.
That
could be kind of tricky because that might, like, with some pre-made campaigns and adventures, that might involve the player having to like read the source material.
Well, yeah, I guess in that case the DM should provide enough information to the players.
Yeah. In that case, it's like asking the DM more and more about the setting, or the DM having a little bit more prepared to describe the setting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like getting to know the world that your character is in will help you decide more what the character would or wouldn't do, or is able to do.
Sure. So yeah, to speed up the pace of play, you really just need to, number 1, prepare. Number 2, prepare some more. Number 3, everybody be on the same page as far as like how you want to deal with things like in combat and so on.
Or on the same page, or like in the player's handbook.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you, Jeff.
Probably the one that has the grapple rules on it. Everybody should at least have that
Number
bookmarked.
4, cut out grapple. That's the way you can speed up pace of play.
Yes. Just take grapple out of it completely.
Right. As for whether or not you should try to speed it up, well, if nobody's having issues with the speed of play, then yeah, you don't need to.
Sure, yeah. Like yeah, if there's not a time constraint, like if your schedule is, works out to where nobody has like work the next day or something like that.
Yeah. Play till 5 a.m.
As long as everybody's
Jeff
having
is
fun.
so tired he makes a joke about love not stacking.
Sure. Yeah, I was definitely falling asleep.
Yeah, and then I don't think it would ever have a negative impact unless you were like trying to lightning round everything.
Right, yeah, definitely don't rush your players, but if you need to start kind of like being like, okay, let's get going, guys.
Sure.
Or like, if everybody's like around joking and things like that, you might have to play like the party pooper at some point or another. Like it's gonna happen when you DM is like you're gonna have to be like, okay, guys, let's get back to this, or we're gonna be here all night.
Yeah, it's kind of like a while ago we had a question that was like, how do you encourage role playing? Mm-hmm. And it's lead by example. Yeah. Same way with speeding up play. If you're the one that's taking forever and joking around and stuff, then everybody else is gonna do it too.
Sure.
So and unfortunately, sometimes you have to be the firm hand, but if you want to speed up the game, speed up yourself, and hopefully everybody else will follow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it for today. If anybody wanted to...
Sorry, I was going to be like, speaking of speeding things up.
Sorry. Yeah, our last few episodes have been going kind of long, so...
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't think anybody minds, except for Gabe, who does all the editing. So.
Yeah. I spend a lot, because I do spend a lot of time editing, so anyway.
Yeah, he does a very good job.
Well, thank you. So if anybody wanted to submit items and questions, please email us at interpartyconflict@gmail.com. For show notes, a running list of questions asked and important links, or to download the episode, go to interpartyconflict.blogspot.com. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/interpartyconflict, or go to our subreddit at reddit.com/r/interpartyconflict. We're also on Twitter at InPartyConflict, and we're on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, YouTube. Please rate, review, and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Even just like a single rating can be really, really helpful. If you want to tell your friends about us, that's always really, really helpful too. One thing that I guess I'll mention a little bit is that I'm going to be looking into avenues for possibly monetizing the podcast.
Oh, sure.
We're not money grubbing or anything like that, but a lot of work goes into this. I would love to be able to make the podcast better, but there's a lot of purchases that I could make, but I can't necessarily justify it without getting some sort of money back from it. So I would love to get maybe another microphone. So if we want to have like a guest speaker on or something like that would be cool to have a third one. So I might in the future be looking at stuff like that. Possibly like a Patreon. I don't know if we have quite a big enough listenership for that.
Yeah, but it's something to look into.
Yeah,
sure.
If anybody has any thoughts, if there are any ways that you would say, I would give you guys money if you did X.
Sure.
Let us know, and we will take that into account. We'll see what we can do with that in the future. Whatever, like, we want to make the podcast as best as possible. Right. We want to make it as good for you guys as we can. So any ideas that you guys have for us to make the podcast better, let us know. And let us know how you can, what you can do to help with that, and see what we can do to help with that. So anyway, reviews, even just telling a friend, getting us a bigger listenership is probably one of the best and easiest things you can do.
Absolutely.
Tell a friend about us. If you know anybody that has any questions about D&D or other tabletop games, just have them send them to us, and we'll discuss them on air.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention was there was something I mentioned, I think, in the last episode,
sure,
or maybe the one before that. But Gabe and I had played a couple games, couple D&D games. There were like the old D&D arcade games.
Yes, Tower of Doom and Shadow over Mystara, I think they're called.
Yeah. So Gabe and I had played those and recorded them a little while back, and
sort of like a little Let's Play thing.
Yeah, and it was something that I had been editing for a while, and mostly just been getting a little lazy on. But anyway, I finally put them up on YouTube, and we actually have a channel. The channel's called Friend Quest. I'll have Gabe put the link in the show notes. But that's just something that Gabe and I did a little while back that might be fun for you guys to watch.
Yeah.
So, and then but I'll be putting up. There's a couple episodes on there right now. Just a few little clips of us playing. I'm gonna put the rest of the playthroughs on there as well, and then I think in the future, Gabe and I might get together and play a few more games and throw something up there.
Yeah, maybe D&D related games, maybe not, maybe just other fun multiplayer games.
Yeah, for sure. And I might be throwing some games of myself on there as well. Just because I like playing video games a lot.
Yeah,
so
and if other people might enjoy watching them, there's no harm in putting them up.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, if anybody's interested, it'll be in the show notes, and I'll probably have them posted on some of the other things like our Twitter and things like that.
Sure. All right. Well, anyway, back to the outro here. Our music is made by Boxcat Games from Nameless the Hackers RPG. So, Jeff, until next time, what should people do?
Drink responsibly.
There you go.